Disasters by Ivy Ruckman. Grand Island, Nebraska, June 4th. A string of 7 tornadoes devastated this central Nebraska city last night, killing 4 persons and injuring 134. Initial reports said 5 persons were killed, and one county official said this morning that she thought more than 30 bodies had been found. The city was battered by the tornadoes over a 3-hour period. When they were over, a 6-block wide swath along Grand Island's 2 main streets was devastated. The Federal Emergency Management Administration said that 513 homes and 60 businesses had been destroyed. In addition, 450 homes and 15 businesses were damaged. Radar indicated that the tornadoes that hit Grand Island were touched off by a thunderstorm cell at least 35 miles wide that formed shortly before 8 p.m. Associated Press, June 4, 1980. Isn't it funny how you remember all the crummy little details on one of those black-letter days? My folks say it was that way with them the day President Kennedy was shot, way back in 1963. And Belle Smiley, the oldest person in our neighborhood, said she could still remember exactly where she was and what she was thinking on Pearl Harbor Day. My all-time worst black-letter day was June 3rd of last summer. There were no notices mailed out on that occasion for sure. There were no indications at all. 20% probability of thunderstorms toward evening was what the local weatherman said that morning. So what's new? Mom talked back to him, poking another spoonful of cereal in my baby brother's smiling mouth. To tell you the truth, the weather was the last thing on my mind. Arthur and I had big plans for that Tuesday. Crafts class first at my Aunt Goldie's place, a couple of hot burritos at Taco John's after, later a bike hike out to the Platte River and a swim at Mormon Island. As Arthur and I pedaled off that day, there were no warnings at all. None. I remember the bottom-heavy look of the sky and those strong blasts of air that hit us going home. I can even tell you what we had for supper on that June the 3rd. All I have to do to recall the wonderful smell of our kitchen that night is to close my eyes and inhale. Mom had just taken a chocolate meringue pie out of the oven. "Can Arthur eat with us?" I asked. "If he calls his mother," she said matter-of-factly. Before Ryan was born, Mom used to call Arthur and me her twins, meaning my buddy and I were practically inseparable. Of course, Arthur has dark skin and a mop of wavy black hair, whereas I'm one of those yellow-haired, freckle-faced types. He's short and fat, I'm not. We could never pass for brothers, let alone twins, because we're different in other ways, too. He's a thinker, I'm a doer. He's crazy about books. I go bonkers over bikes. Just the same, we consider ourselves blood relatives, and that's what counts. As Arthur stepped to the wall phone and dialed, Mom gave me a sideways look that meant, "Why don't you clear things with me first?" I just lifted an extra glass and plate off the shelf and pretended not to notice. After dinner, Arthur and I flipped on the TV. "Channel 5 or 10, I asked. 10. I moved his feet and sat down next to him. The TV show had already started, but that rarely bothers Arthur and me. When we're watching something funny, we can tune in any old time. During the first commercial, I went to the kitchen for potato chips. When I returned, Arthur was so glad for the arrival of food that we almost missed the severe weather announcement. In the St. Paul area, just north of Grand Island, Mom rushed into the living room. "Listen," she shushed us. "In effect until further notice is given. Funnel clouds have been sighted near St. Paul, Dannebrog, and surrounding rural areas." "Do we have to go to the basement?" I asked. Now that we were all set for the next show, I hoped not. Mom didn't answer. She had her face right up against our big front window, shielding her eyes, trying to see out. Normally, she's a lot more casual about storms, but Dad was out at my grandpa's farm fixing a tractor. I knew she was worried he'd get caught in a tornado on the way home. "It's pitch black out there," she said. I've never seen it so dark this early. It was noisy outside as well. Our shake shingles, flapping and smacking overhead, made me think somebody was up there playing a xylophone. Minerva, our cat, didn't like the weather either. She was crouched under Dad's chair with her ears back. Do we have to go downstairs? I asked again. Not yet, Danny. We'll keep listening to the TV. Arthur spoke up. Tornadoes move from southwest to northeast, remember? I remembered. Our science class had taken a field trip to visit the weather service out at the airport. Arthur made arm motions toward a plant hanging in the corner of the room. It'll head off that way someplace. Arthur has books on everything. Birds, trees, flowers, insects, amphibians, prunes, tornadoes. So, his expert opinion should have made me feel better, but it didn't. He helped himself to another potato chip, then settled back into the cushions. He wasn't worried. We watched TV another few minutes, but I couldn't get into it. Not that I was scared exactly. I'd been through dozens of tornado watches in my life, and nothing ever happened. Every spring, practically, we have to hit for the cellar, as Grandpa puts it. But when a tornado watch changes to a warning, and when the siren starts, well, that's when things aren't so mellow anymore. Next thing I knew, Mom was at the hall closet putting her red windbreaker on over her jeans. I'm driving over to check on old Mrs. Smiley, she said. She doesn't answer her phone. She's probably turned that hearing aid down again and won't have her TV on. Now listen, both of you. We listened. She was using a very firm voice. I want you to take the flashlight and a blanket and put them in the downstairs bathroom. I want you to do it this minute. I nodded. If the siren starts, get Ryan and go downstairs. Don't wake him up if you can help it, all right? Arthur's eyes got big listening to Mom. He told me once they never go to the basement during windstorms. That figures. They moved here from California. What do they know? Ever hear of a tornado in good old CA? I'll be right back, Mom told us. I'm sure nothing's going to happen, but we have to be prepared, right? She smiled and waved her car keys at us as she left, barely squeezing out before the door slammed shut again. Hoo-wee, Arthur exclaimed. Listen to that wind. I hurried downstairs with the emergency stuff and set it on the bathroom counter. Minerva went with me, scurrying across my feet, acting the way she does when she wants attention. I picked her up by the middle, but she just gave me her mean jungle look. Upstairs, Arthur was hooting and hollering again. I was missing all the good parts, so I hurried up the 2 short flights of steps, with Minerva dashing ahead of me. Sometime in there, in the middle of all that comedy on the screen, the siren began. Now that is a very sobering sound. It's unlike anything else, having its own built-in chill factor. I thought of Mom first. She'd hear it and come back, I told myself. Then I thought of Grandma and Grandpa and Dad, and how far the farm was from town. They wouldn't even hear the siren out there. In half a second, I was at the phone. 4 rings, then I heard Grandma's voice. Grandma, I shouted into the phone, there's a tornado just north of GI. The siren's going. Can you hear it? A voice said something, but it sounded so far away. Talk louder, Grandma. I can't hear you. The voice faded away entirely. There's a tornado coming. Can you hear me? There wasn't anything on the line now but the sound of another phone ringing faintly, as if it were in New York or someplace far away. By then, Arthur was standing next to me. I was just about to hand him the phone when, abruptly, the siren stopped. It didn't taper off. It just quit, as if someone snipped it with scissors. Except for the TV, everything around us suddenly seemed very still. Hey, he said, raising his eyebrows. They changed their minds. I hung up the phone and ran to the door, thinking I might see Mom pulling into the driveway, but no luck. It's quit blowing, I called over my shoulder to Arthur. Sure enough, the wind had died down. Maybe the storm wouldn't amount to anything after all. That nice, comforting thought had hardly entered my mind when the siren blared forth again. With a jolt, I remembered what Mom had told us to do. Let's turn on the radio, Arthur said. I hurried down the hallway to Ryan's room. I hated to get him up. I knew he'd wake up and cry. Without Mom, Arthur and I would have him screaming in our ears the whole time. When I saw him in his crib, peacefully sleeping, his rear end in the air, I just didn't have the heart to wake him up. I'd wait a minute or two. Mom would be back. Anyway, it's blowing over, I told myself. Quickly, I closed the door. That's when the lights started flickering. In the hallway, I practically had a head-on with Arthur, who was coming at me real fast. The look on his face scared me. There's no, there's no, what? There's no radio reception anymore. It just went dead. This guy, he kept saying, tornado alert, tornado alert. Then it went dead. We rushed back to the living room. The TV was flashing these big letters that filled the entire screen. CD, CD, CD. What's it mean? Arthur cried. Civil defense emergency. I whirled around. I'm getting Ryan. I smashed face first into Ryan's butterfly mobile. That's how I knew I was at the crib. I felt for him and lifted him out, but we didn't get far. He was caught in the mobile, his arm or his head. I couldn't see. I couldn't get him loose. Mom, I yelled, though I knew she wasn't there. I grabbed the mobile and pulled it from the ceiling. The tornado was close, and I knew it. Both my ears had popped, and all the drains in the house were sucking like monsters. Arthur was at the bottom of the stairs, waiting. Thank God he'd found the flashlight. I jumped the last half-flight to the floor. Hurry, I screamed. I swung into the doorway of the bathroom with Arthur right behind me. We crawled into the shower and sat on the floor. Shine it here, on Ryan, I gasped. He's caught in this thing. By now, Ryan was kicking and screaming, and his eyes were big in the light. Once we got the mess of strings free of Ryan's sweaty nightshirt, Arthur kicked the mobile against the wall by the toilet. I have to go home, he cried. They won't go to the basement. Mama never does. The beam of light bounced around the blackness of the bathroom as Arthur scrambled to his feet, but I grabbed and held on to him. You can't go. It's here. Can't you feel it? The siren quit again as I pulled him back down and threw my leg over him. The flashlight clattered to the floor and rolled away from us. We heard it next. The lull, the deadliest quiet ever, one that makes you think you might explode. The heat in the room built until I couldn't get my breath. Then I began to hear noises, a chair scraping across the kitchen floor upstairs. Your mom's back, Arthur said, pushing at my leg. I knew it wasn't my mother moving the chair. The noises got worse. It seemed as if every piece of furniture was moving around up there, big, heavy things smashing into each other. A window popped. Crash, another. Glass shattered everywhere. I pulled a towel down over Ryan and held him tight. If he was still crying, I didn't know it, because I was feeling the sucking this time. It was like something trying to lift my body right up off the floor. Arthur felt it too. Mother of God, he crossed himself. We're going to die. 10 seconds more, and that howling, shrieking tornado was upon us. The blanket, I screamed at Arthur's ear. We covered ourselves, hands shaking wildly. I wasn't worrying about my mom then, or my dad, or Mrs. Smiley. Just us. Ryan and Arthur and me, huddled together there on the shower floor. The roaring had started somewhere to the east, then came bearing down on us like 100 freight trains. Only that twister didn't move on. It stationed itself right overhead, making the loudest noise I'd ever heard, whining worse than any jet. There was a tremendous crack, and I felt the wall shudder behind us. I knew then that our house was being ripped apart. Suddenly, chunks of ceiling were falling on our heads. We'll be buried, was all I could think. We pulled the blanket over our heads, and I began to pray. Out loud, though I couldn't hear my own voice. God help us, God help us. I said it over and over into Ryan's damp hair, my lips moving against his head. I knew Arthur was praying too, jammed there into my side. I could feel Ryan's heart beating through his undershirt against mine. There was nothing but terror as the roar of that tornado went on and on. I thought the world was coming to an end, and so would we any minute. Then I felt Ryan's fat fingers close around one of mine. He pulled my hand into his mouth and started sucking on my finger. It made me cry. The tears ran down my cheeks and onto his head. With the whole world blowing to pieces around us, Ryan took my hand and made me feel better. A tornado's forward speed is generally 30 to 50 miles an hour, a meteorologist had told us. Our tornado's forward speed was 0. 5 minutes or 10 we couldn't tell, but it seemed like an hour. Roaring and humming and shrieking, that twister was right on top of us. I'll never be that scared again as long as I live. Neither will Arthur. When at last the noise began to let up, Arthur jerked out from under the blanket, leaned across me to the opening of the shower, and vomited into the broken glass and sheetrock. Squeamish as I am about something like that, I wasn't revolted. I wondered if I had wet my pants myself. I couldn't tell for sure because water had started rising under us in the shower. My shoes and jeans were both soaked. "Arthur," I said, my voice shaking, but thinking to encourage him, "we made it. We're alive." But then the hail began. Once it got going, it hit us with the force of buckshot. Those marble-sized hailstones were pouring in from above somewhere. I knew then that the kitchen was gone, floor and all. It didn't take long for Arthur to crawl back beside me, but even under the blanket those hailstones hurt like crazy, smacking our heads and shoulders. We moved together to protect Ryan. Suddenly I was hit with a sickness worse than Arthur's. "Mom, where was she? Did she get to Mrs. Smiley's?" "Arthur," I cried, sitting up straight. "My mom! My whole family," he choked out. In that second, I could see my mother's car hurtling through the air, see it ripping open, the black funnel sucking her out and swirling her away. I could hear her scream. I started crying. "She can't be dead. She can't be." I hit my head against the tile to make the pictures stop. "Shut up," Arthur shouted. "Just shut up, will you?" He pulled away so we weren't touching and drew himself into the opposite corner of the shower. I didn't care. I felt as if someone had reached down my throat and turned me inside out. Chills raced up my arms. I was shaking all over. At least I scrabbled for something to hang on to. At least I still have my dad. He'd be safe, wouldn't he, out on the farm? I clenched my teeth to keep from going to pieces. "Please, God, please," I begged, "make everyone okay." Overhead, the storm continued to rage. The sharp sound of hail striking tile went on, and I began to wonder if we might just be battered to death. I shuddered and pulled up my knees, shifting the baby once more. With the temperature dropping and the water rising, we couldn't stay in the shower stall forever. What were we going to do? Only Ryan had recovered enough to be himself, and was dabbling one hand in the water, making noises. Once I got him in a standing position against my knees, he began talking and stretching under the blanket tent. He wasn't worried. Suddenly it occurred to me that I had saved his life. I had. I warmed myself on that thought as I rubbed my cheek against his head. That was when I remembered Minerva, my cat. Oh no, had she followed us downstairs? But a cat would find a place, wouldn't she, to ride out the storm? Cats are smart. They can take care of themselves. The hard peppering sounds of the hail were growing slushier, softer. The hail was turning to rain. Quickly I slipped the blanket off my head. My gosh! There was the night sky where the bathroom ceiling had been. I shivered as icy raindrops splattered in my face and went streaking down my neck. Somehow, seeing was worse than knowing. "Arthur," I nudged him with my foot. "Look up there." "Listen," Arthur said, now that things had quieted a little. "Do you hear water running?" I'd been hearing it, water gurgling and splashing onto the cement floor. "Pipes are broken," he said. "Let's go," I said through chattering teeth. though I didn't have any idea where. Arthur got out ahead of me, carefully picking his way across the bathroom rubble. He held up something shiny, our towel rack, bent like a boomerang. With that, he dug among chunks of sheetrock for the flashlight, which miraculously was still on. I stood up with Ryan in my arms. He patted my face. He was as glad to be up and moving as I was. The first shock was Arthur's because he had the flashlight. When I pushed into the doorway beside him, I caught my breath. Our house was gone. Roof, walls, floor, gone. Inside the foundation, surrounding us and blocking our way, was a jungle of fallen support beams and splintered wood. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, letting the horrible truth soak in. "The stairs must be buried too," I said finally. Arthur climbed up onto the arm of Dad's easy chair, which was now in the bathroom doorway. He covered the west foundation from one end to the other with the light. "Dan, maybe we could climb out over that pile of bricks on the other side." Just then, a low moaning sound raised hackles on the back of my neck. Arthur jumped off the chair. We froze. The noise rumbled to a crescendo right over our heads, making us jump when it crashed. Thunder! My lord, it was only thunder. "Take Ryan a minute," I said, recovering enough to trade him for the flashlight. "I'll give it a try." I left them at the bathroom door and snaked my way alongside the hallway, ducking and burrowing under debris when I had to. Glass crunched underfoot with every step, and I kept getting snagged by things I couldn't see. The biggest hurdle was a mass of wet carpeting, gold shag from our living room. I pushed against it. It was too soggy, too heavy. I'd have to crawl over. "Ow! Ouch!" I cried as something gouged me in the leg. "You okay?" Arthur yelled. "I'm okay," I answered back. My jeans were ripped and I was bleeding, but the wound wasn't mortal, as Arthur would say. I stood there a minute, breathing hard, wondering what to do next. It was raining again, and I was shaking. From the cold, from being so scared. I wanted my mom and dad so much. I slid down on my heels, pushing my face into the wet carpet. Hot tears squeezed out of my eyes. What in the world was I supposed to do? "Dan, what's going on?" Arthur called, and I remembered I'd left him in the dark. I turned around and went crashing back to Arthur and Dan. "We can't get through," I said with fresh panic. I took Ryan and held him close, rocking and shushing him the way I'd seen Mom do it. He snuggled into my chest. He didn't know it, but he was warming me as much as I was warming him. Just then a light appeared overhead, bobbing up and down with somewhat steps. "Help!" Arthur yelled at once. "We're down here!" "Arthur! Dear God, is that you?" Hope shot through me like an electric charge. Arthur was jumping up and down. "Stacy?" It was Arthur's sister. He shot the light straight up in the sky, waving it around like a beacon. Seconds later, Stacy was looking down on us from above, and we were lighting up each other's faces, which didn't need lighting up at all. We would have glowed in the dark. We were so glad to see each other. "Where's Mama? Is she okay? What about—" "Everyone's okay now that I found you." For the first time, Arthur burst into tears. Big sobs racked his body. He couldn't have held them back if he'd tried. "I thought you were all dead," Arthur gulped. "I didn't think you'd go downstairs." "Oh, Arthur, we didn't. There wasn't time. We had to flatten out on the floor. It was awful. We were lying there, holding each other. Arthur—" Her voice broke. "Ronnie Vay got sucked right out the window." I gasped. I tried to hang on to her, but I couldn't. I couldn't do anything but scream. "Stacy, is she all right?" "She is. It's a pure miracle. It threw her into the bushes, knocked her right out." I shuddered. I could feel that sucking tornado all over again. I could see Ronnie. Ryan let out a first-class wail about then that sent all of us into action. Stacy leaned over the foundation and spotted the toilet tank with her big flashlight. "Listen, Dan," she said, gulping hard. "Can you climb up on that John with Ryan?" I nodded. "Hand the baby up to me first," she said. "Then I'll help you guys." Our yard looked like a World War II battlefield. Next to the flattened garage, Dad's prized white Corvette lay on its top like a discarded Matchbox toy. Somewhere under that trash heap was my bike, my beloved 10-speed racer. "The whole neighborhood's gone," Stacy said. Wreckage was scattered in every direction as far as we could see. Stacy handed me the torch so she could snap her dad's big denim jacket around Ryan. "Stacy, I have to find my mom," I blurted out suddenly. "What do you mean? Don't you know where she is?" I could feel the corners of my mouth pulling down. I turned away, so Arthur had to tell her about Mom leaving to check on Mrs. Smiley. Then he asked Stacy if she could take Ryan to their house, so the two of us could go look for Mom. "Arthur," she exclaimed, "we don't have a house anymore." His jaw dropped. "We don't? All that's left is a few walls. The whole neighborhood looks like this." It was Arthur's turn to be speechless. I know how sick it sounds, but somehow hearing such bad news made me feel better. We were all in the same boat. "Where's Mama now?" Arthur asked. "Patrol cars were down at the end of the block loading people up. I begged her to let me come to Dan's and look for you. She said if I found you, we should get out fast. It's too dangerous to stay here." I stopped right in front of her. "I'm not leaving without my mom." "Of course not, Dan. We'll find her. I bet she's waiting out the storm at Mrs. Smiley's right now." A blast of wind plastered my wet clothes to my body, triggering a bad case of the shakes. I prayed to God Stacy was right. Once we got to the street, we took off running. Covering those 3 blocks was like reliving my worst nightmare. Rain-soaked, shaken by thunder that rolled across the sky like kettle drums, I kept telling myself I'd wake up and laugh, because none of it was true. It was just too terrible, that's all. All structures, houses, garages, fences, telephone poles, had been leveled. The debris scattered helter-skelter. The trees looked as if some giant with a big, meaty hand had stripped the main branches and snapped off the rest. We went a long time without stopping, stumbling, ducking things that were blowing loose. We were so intent on sweeping both sides of the street with our lights we sometimes crashed into each other in the dark. "Mom! Mom!" I tried yelling at first, but the wind shredded my words. When I saw Mom's car, my heart quit beating altogether. It was a battered wreck wrapped in a length of chain-link fence. "Mom!" I screamed, clambering over everything to get to it. My hands shook wildly as I shone the light inside. Her purse lay on the front seat, covered with broken glass. "Mom! Mom!" I cried, frantically hauling stuff out from under the car. Boards and bricks and chunks of siding, throwing them anywhere, digging and crying until I couldn't see. I had to find her. Arthur grabbed my arm from behind. "Come on, Dan," he yelled. "She made it to Mrs. Smiley's. I know she did." I shook him off. I had to find her. Then the two of them got hold of me and pulled me away from the car. I kicked at Stacy, swore at Arthur, but they wouldn't let go. I knew she was there, buried under that car. I knew it. I was so crazy right then, I didn't see the person in the red windbreaker hurrying toward us. Seconds later, I was in my mother's arms, crying like a baby. Arthur and Stacy were crying too, but Mom and I were the ones making most of the noise. We all had our arms around each other next. Mom was kissing everybody. There were more tornadoes that night in Grand Island. In fact, 6 or 7 tornadoes hit our city. Our cat Minerva never did show up. I guess a lightweight kitty couldn't survive those winds. But we found Dad early the next morning. Our whole family danced around, hugging and kissing each other. I knew right then that nothing else mattered. You can do without all kinds of things. Your house, your bike, your room, a whole city of people, if you have the ones you love. A word from the author. Writing Night of the Twisters by Ivy Ruckman. June 4th, 1980, Salt Lake City. I was on my way home and had just turned on the car radio for some news. Hearing the word Nebraska, I sat up and listened. A series of severe tornadoes had hit the city of Grand Island the night before. 30 to 35 people are believed dead, said the announcer. I stepped on the gas. A favorite cousin and her family lived in Grand Island. I had been to visit them only 3 weeks before. Please, not Florence, I remember thinking as I raced home to the phone. No luck. The lines were down. Finally, 10 days later, Florence Rosendale was able to reach me. We lived through it, she said, but we lost everything. Car, house, furniture, all but the microwave oven. She laughed nervously at that point, but I was covered with goosebumps. I asked 100 questions, eager to hear every detail. 2 years later, when the goosebumps wouldn't go away, I began to write Night of the Twisters, a novel for young readers. Once in the grip of an idea, I find it best to be a good listener. I must hear whatever comes bubbling up from inside. I also began seeing scenes in my head, imagining what might happen if. Again and again I thought about my cousin's terrifying night. I tried hard to imagine how it would be to start over with only the clothes on one's back. Deep down inside, where books are born, I may have wanted to experience that disaster myself. Questions such as, what would it be like, or what would I have done, nagged at me. I wanted to know, and writing Dan's story was the best way I knew to find out. In one sense, Night of the Twisters arrived whole in my mind. The actual storm, where and when it took place, how it progressed, gave me a setting. What happened to my cousin provided a plot framework. Newspaper accounts offered one great story after another. In another way, Night of the Twisters arrived in bits and pieces, as a mountain of details that I must make into fiction. Compare writing a novel to finding a box of bicycle parts on the doorstep. Your heart sinks peering in at the jumble of spokes, chain links, rims, brakes, and handlebars, knowing you'll have to assemble everything without a how-to manual. In writing about the Grand Island disaster, there were a daunting number of bits and pieces to think about. The problem was to arrange, fit, and adjust all those parts to make the book run as smoothly and perfectly as a new bike. For once, deciding on a title was easy. The one I chose would do 3 jobs for me. It would hook the reader, set time limits for the story, and create a mood. Take the word night, for instance. Forget peaceful sleep. How about a night of terror and flight? How about a single night that tests a character's courage and changes everything, even what that person values? Notice, too, the S at the end of the word twisters. Dan would survive no ordinary summer storm. Multiple tornadoes, said the news report. I wrote the opening in order to meet Dan Hatch so I could begin to know him. Research came next. I made many trips to the library where I studied weather books and newspapers, taking notes. I pored over news photos with a magnifying glass and pestered my cousin with questions. Exactly what were you thinking when the house exploded overhead? The book was only half finished when I knew I had to visit Grand Island. I wanted to talk to survivors. I needed to see South Locust and Meaves Bowl, places I was writing about. I hoped to experience again the sounds and smells, the feel of a Nebraska spring. I spent 2 stormy weeks interviewing in Grand Island and Hastings. A civil defense chief, a meteorologist, police officers, journalists all talked to me. Everyone remembered the night of June 3rd, 1980 in vivid detail. In the end, my best interviews were with elementary school students who had lost their homes. They knew firsthand how it would be for Dan and Arthur and were able to communicate their feelings to me. Time spent daydreaming, a form of planning, may be as important to me as the time actually spent writing a book. Can you imagine working while walking or swimming, staring off into the distance, or scrubbing floors? Eventually, though, I had to get on with the big job, putting words and sentences down on the page to create a story. Including research, Night of the Twisters took most of a year to write. I went over each chapter 7 to 12 times, then revised again after my editor read the manuscript. The book begins slowly, then winds up as we imagine a twister would. Once the reader knows and cares about the characters, the first tornado strikes. From that point on, the pace never lets up. My reward comes when someone writes to say, Dan Hatch was a boy just like me. Then I know the reader and I have grabbed hands. We've come through a life-threatening disaster together and are somehow better for it. I hope we'll meet again, maybe in the pages of another book. Thinking about it. 1. Dan is scared when the tornado comes, but he acts bravely. What have you done even though you were scared? 2. Dan and Arthur knew what to do in a tornado. What warnings told them it was time to take action? What steps did they take to protect themselves? 3. What do you think Dan and his family will do to get their lives back to normal?